All right, everyone. So the last couple of classes, we have talked about memory in terms of how we encode it. How do we get it into our brain? How do we store it in our brain? And then how do we bring it back out when we need it? And now we're going to move on to the next section, which is actually forgetting. How do we forget information? So hopefully you have your lecture slides up. There are three major ways, and they go right along with how we encode information. So forgetting as encoding, forgetting as storage, and forgetting as retrieval. So we're going to start with encoding failure. The simple fact is sometimes we forget information because it was never encoded in the first place. Examples can be environmental information. I give you the example on your slide, how many championship signs are hung in the gym that you've been in at least 100 times in your high school career. Now you go into the gym all the time, and you can picture them, but do you know how many there are exactly? Unless you made it a point to learn them, you don't, because when you encode information in your environment, the details that get remembered are really about what's important to the event that's happening right there. So how many windows are in a room, how many doors, that type of stuff. That's not particularly an item that is remembered a lot by the average person. You can train yourself to encode that information, particularly people with jobs or professions that might involve them being very aware of a room. For example, a police officer trains their encoding information in terms of how they remember and identify information when they walk in a room. We do know that forgetfulness does increase with age because as you get older, your brain activity slows down, which means the pace at which you can encode information also slows down, which again means if you have the same amount of time, you're going to remember less things. So if you're trying to remember what you're doing in the living room and you're doing 3 different things and you put your glasses down and then you go to find them again and you can't, you didn't have time to encode the information on where you put the glasses. Right here. So, and it's a very simple example, and there's lots and lots of examples of encoding failure. So you're going to go to the next slide. Okay. And it's very simple. We've all seen pennies. You've seen pennies your entire life. Maybe when you're younger, you try to eat pennies like Henry does. I don't know why, but he loves it. Can anyone tell me what the right penny is? Okay, I'm going to count to 10. And then you can, we'll see if you got the right penny. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The right pen. You need more time? Okay, fine. 10 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The right penny is A. That is the correct version of the front of a penny. Yeah. You could see any of them and you would recognize them as pennies, and you could use them in a store and they would be used as pennies. But you don't process that information as to what an exact penny is unless you're trying to counterfeit pennies, which would have been wonderful if we had our musical going on and you could learn about counterfeiting, Terrence. All right, so moving on, forgetting as storage failure. Okay, so you've encoded the information, okay, but maybe the information isn't staying with you. Most of our studies on storage has come from Hermann Ebbinghaus, who was a philosopher in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who studied memory. And he did several studies that focused on 30 days of memory. And he came up with a well-studied and well-founding forgetting curve. We recognize that most forgetting happens very rapidly. So in a 30-day trial, within the first few days is when you're going to forget pretty much everything you're going to forget. And then it levels off. And you'll see that long-term memories are established in that leveling off to the point where you can remember them for decades later. Okay? And those are called permastore memories. Okay, the ones that hang out. So if any of you, when you were little, learned in Spanish, uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis, siete, ocho, nueve, diez, or maybe just up to cinco, and then you took no Spanish for the rest of your life, there's still a good chance you might remember those first 5 numbers. Okay. So that is looking at storage failure in the terms of once the information's there, how do you keep it? So that's going back to the methods in which you study and how often that information is processed to help with that storage. Obviously, the drop-off rate changes if you are actively trying to store the information. All right, so our last form of forgetting we're going to talk about today is retrieval failure. So this is when the information has been encoded, it is stored in your brain, it is there, but you just can't bring it back out. And there's 2 major ways that happens. The first, and most prevalent, is interference. Okay, so when one memory gets in the way of the retrieval of another. So there's 2 types. There's proactive interference and retroactive interference. Proactive is when an older memory disrupts the recall of a newer memory. So they give an example of getting a new locker number, but you've done your locker number for the past 4 years, so that keeps getting in the way. You keep putting in the old locker number. Same thing as if you get a new job and you've always driven the same way, and then you get a new job and you go to drive and you're not paying attention, you accidentally drive to the old job. Okay. Same deal. Retroactive information is when newer memory disrupts the recall of older memory. The easy example is getting a new school schedule. You can tell me what your schedule is now. Not now, because now it's just all day on the couch. But what you had each period before the quarantine. And then I can say, all right, well, what was your schedule last year? And you can probably tell me what classes you took. And I'll ask the year before that, and you can name me 3 teachers. That's how it is, because the new schedule is so prevalent in your life, it just completely blocks the other memories of the old schedules. So that's interference. It's just a memory getting in the way of another memory. Pro is if it's old. Retro is if it's new, in terms of disrupting the memory you're trying to get. For the other type of retrieval failure, there's some scientific evidence to show it's true and others to show there's issues. And it has to do with what is actually remembered. So it's about motivated forgetting. Sometimes we forget because we want to forget. That's to help you protect against anxiety or distressing information. Examples they give in the book are like, you are now on a workout cleanse and you're like, oh, this is amazing, I feel great, I'm really sticking on this schedule of exercising, and you're just ignoring the fact that after you exercised yesterday, you also ate a whole bag of Doritos. And you're just going to gloss over that because it's not pertinent to how you feel right now. Okay. There is evidence that is true, that some memories will not stick because you simply don't want to focus on them. Okay. If you look at people who sometimes are what we call hypocrites, they might do a lot of motivated forgetting. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe she did this, this, and this. And you're like, you did that last Tuesday. Okay. So that is motivated forgetting. There is a form of that Sigmund Freud came up with, good old boy Freud, that we now know is most likely not true. It's, again, pop culture. Unfortunately, it's very popular and very much on TV and movies. There's very little scientific evidence to show it works. There's a lot of evidence to show it does not work. And that's repression. And his theory is that anxiety-producing memories are moved to the unconscious mind. So you repress them, you don't remember them, you can't remember what happened in your childhood. And almost all research says it is the exact opposite of that. In fact, the more anxiety or the more stress produced in an event makes it more likely to be remembered. You might really want to forget it, but it will be very, very hard to do so. And that is why you see a lot of issues with PTSD where suddenly memories come up because they're not repressed. You can pretend like they don't exist, but that's not the same as repression in terms of what Freud argued for. Okay. All right, so that is your lecture on forgetting. Next class, we'll talk about memory construction and a little more information on how we get our memories to come back to us. So, you are going to do the activity for today, and then you're going to do the exit slip, and then you're done. So, short lecture. Hope you enjoyed it. See y'all later.